Get ready to embrace debate. First Take starts now.
I'm Kerry Chow. Coming up on the First Take podcast, what should we expect from LeBron tonight against the Pacers? Plus, are the Spurs about to send the Thunder home for the summer? And the Clippers have a buyer, but does this mean the NBA is done with Donald Sterling? The First Take podcast starts right now. Good morning and welcome into First Take. I'm Kerry Chow in for Kerry Champion. Joining us from San Antonio, Stephen A. Smith, and in New York, Skip Bayless. Fellas, how come you guys always leave me alone here in the studio?
All I got to say is, Stephen A., I wish I were in San Antonio right now because I'm sure it's a beautiful morning in San Antonio.
Yes, it is. No doubt about that.
All right, lots to talk about today. Did disgraced owner Donald Sterling just become a $2 billion bigot? That was the winning bid by former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer to buy the Clippers. The guys weigh in on the record-setting offer and what should happen next. Plus, Blowgate continues. Lance Stephenson blowing in LeBron James's face in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals. But did the move blow Lance's future? The guys talk Heat Pacers. But we start with the blowout in San Antonio. The Spurs cruised to a 117-89 win over the Thunder in Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals. Tim Duncan led the way with 22 points and 12 boards, his 154th career playoff double-double, 3 shy for most all-time. Here's Duncan after the game.
It's the craziest series I've ever been involved in. The back and forth, the changes, the leads and the wins. I don't know how to explain it.
5 games, 5 blowout wins. Skip, we'll start with you. How shocked are you at the results here?
Stephen A. Smith, I am extremely happily shocked at what happened last night because I did not see that coming. Last night, the San Antonio Spurs finally broke through the mental, physical barrier that was Serge Ibaka. And I remind you that before last night, the San Antonio Spurs had gone up against Serge Ibaka and company 6 times this season. 4 times regular season and 2 times, as you well remember, games 3 and 4 back in Oklahoma City. And all 6 times they had looked overmatched and demoralized by a Serge Ibaka who had become a jump-shooting, shot-blocking boogeyman for my San Antonio Spurs. And last night, they finally broke the code. They broke his spell. They broke through and regained their San Antonio Spurs confidence. And what were the 2 biggest reasons? Because 2 aging all-time greats, Tim Duncan at 38, Manu Ginobili at almost 37, set the do-or-die tone. And they showed their younger teammates they just wanted this game more than the young Thunder Stars wanted this game. Stephen A. Smith. Tim Duncan, 22 points and 12 rebounds. Manu Ginobili, 19 points and 6 assists in just 21 minutes of play. But what shocked me the most was that after the first 10 minutes of the game, in which Serge Ibaka looked like Serge, he made 2 big jumpers. He had a sensational block. He must have altered 2 or 3 more San Antonio Spurs shots. He basically disappeared. After a ridiculously hot start, Reggie Jackson basically disappeared. So the flashpoint of the game for me was that Russell Westbrook angry Thunder dunk. Can we see that? That was 2:40 left in the first quarter. And Stephen A., I thought at that moment, uh-oh, here we go again. And what happened? My man Manu came right back with the dagger answer. The first quarter dagger answer of a 3-point shot that cut the lead from 7 all of a sudden back to 4. And from that point forward, my Spurs went from 7 down to eventually 33 points up. And what was the lineup that did the breakaway damage? It was the one I kept calling for on the show and on Twitter. Manu, Diaw, Duncan, Parker, and Kawhi. And Stephen A., I sure hope I see a lot more of that lineup in Game 6 back in Oklahoma City. The floor is yours.
Well, it was a brilliant move by Greg Popovich. Let's call it what it is. Before the game, when it was hinted that changes would be made, Manu Ginobili was talking to all of us in the media and said that he couldn't reveal anything because we'd have to ask Popovich because he's not allowed to talk. And as a result of that, we surmised that he would probably be in the starting lineup. If not him, then definitely somebody like a Boris Diaw to replace a Thiago Splitter. And what does Greg Popovich do? He goes out there and he puts Matt Bonner, of all people, on the floor. Why? Because you've got your stretch four offense out there. You pull Serge Ibaka away from the paint area, forcing him to defend on the perimeter, which opens up the lanes for a lot of San Antonio's players. It facilitated ball movement. It put dudes in attack mode. And on top of it all, they weren't walking around acting like they had whiplash or acting like their head was on a swivel, continuously looking for Serge Ibaka. Because with Bonner out there, capable of hitting three-point shots, you had no choice but to respect it. And as a result, it opened up the floor for San Antonio offensively. You also have to look at Kawhi Leonard on Russell Westbrook. Certainly, Russell Westbrook had some good plays. When you have a bigger guy like a Kawhi Leonard who has the agility and the athletic ability to somewhat guard Russell Westbrook, because nobody can completely guard him, you know what? That does a lot for San Antonio. The flip side to it, however, is that you got a smaller Danny Green on a Kevin Durant. And this is about the third time in these playoffs we've seen somebody guard Kevin Durant who was considerably smaller. And although he got his points, he wasn't the Kevin Durant MVP dude that we all know and love. Tony Allen in Memphis, Chris Paul in the Clippers series, and now we saw Danny Green on Kevin Durant to some degree. And what happens? To some degree anyway, he's relatively neutralized. And these are the kind of things that you have to be mindful for moving forward. Will OKC make up for this? I believe so, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show, because I believe there will be a Game 7. But at the same time, Skip, this victory was incredibly important for San Antonio, because unlike your prognostication where you thought they'd lose Game 5 and then come back and win Game 6 and 7, I think it was incredibly important for them to win this particular game, because no matter what happens in Game 6, they know they come back to their home floor for a Game 7 Monday night as a worst-case scenario, and I think that puts them in a better position to go back to the NBA Finals.
I did not prognosticate that they would lose Game 5. I told you I thought they could win Game 4, and I was wrong about that. But once they lost that game, they had to win this game last night, and we didn't have a show yesterday, so I didn't get to pick the game.
Okay.
So I want to be clear about that. And then I also want to be clear,
okay,
I'm sorry, as much as I love Greg Popovich, I can't give him brilliant move for inserting Matt Bonner into the starting lineup, a guy who barely played all year and didn't start a game. And Stephen A., I tweeted just before tip-off, is Pop giving up? Because I couldn't figure it out. Now, I love the idea of the stretch four. I love that concept. But that should have been Boris Diaw. And it wasn't until Boris Diaw came in for a Matt Bonner, who wound up playing 17 minutes, had 0 points, 0 rebounds, and 0 assists, did Boris Diaw start to be that stretch four. He made 2 big threes, and he started bringing the bigs away from the basket, be it Perkins or Ibaka or whoever else was having to guard him at that point. So I give you that, and I love your point about noticing the switch of Kawhi onto Westbrook, because Westbrook in Game 4 had 20 points on drives to the basket. Last night he only had 7 points on drives, including that thunder dunk, that rage dunk, but only 7 points. And then Danny Green did an absolutely sensational job bothering Kevin Durant just enough. He made 11 out of 21 shots, but he kept him to a low roar, kept Russell with Kawhi to a low roar, and it allowed them to start to pull away with superior attacking of the basket and ball movement that we should have seen in Games 3 and 4 back in Oklahoma City, and I don't know why we didn't.
Well, my apologies. Number one, I thought you said they'd win Game 6 and 7 and lose Game 5, so that's my mistake. But let me say this to you. I certainly would look at Danny, the insertion of Matt Bonner, Skip, and I'd say to you, if you look at what Boris Diaw has done, particularly over the last 3 games or so coming off the bench, I don't think you mess with that. And that's why I had no problem with him not being inserted into the starting lineup, because I think the spark and the punch that he's been able to give them offensively off the bench has boded well for them, okay? So when you look at it, you're reacting to Serge Ibaka. That's what the Bonner move was all about. It was almost like Popovich was saying, since none of you guys wanted to pay attention to Serge Ibaka, let me do it for you. And that's exactly what he did, and I think it worked to perfection. Not to mention the fact that after those first 10 minutes, Skip, what have I been saying throughout this series? Either Serge Ibaka was not going to play, or even when he came back, I said, look, I'm not convinced that he can continue to play the way he played in Game 3. He came out there in Game 4. Both Games 3 and 4, he logged over 30 minutes. Last night, whereas we didn't see any clear-cut evidence of him being hobbled or whatever the case may be, he certainly didn't seem like himself. And that's been my question about this guy. If Serge Ibaka was 100% from the beginning of the series, Oklahoma City, to me, goes to the NBA Finals. But I've had questions about Serge Ibaka. Even when he's played well, I've said, how long is this going to last? And I still find myself sitting here this morning asking the same question.
Okay, I hope you're right about that for my sake. But I thought last night, from the second quarter on, was more about San Antonio finally playing harder overall than Oklahoma City did. And you can just see it in the hustle point stats, because the Spurs won the boards 48-35. They attempted more free throws, 30-20. Fast break points, 14-4 San Antonio. Points in the paint, 40-36 San Antonio. Stephen A., those are all just about wanting it more than the Thunder did. So now we go back to Game 6 in Oklahoma City. Can the Spurs continue to play at that high of a level? It'll be tough. But I loved it last night that Manu only played 21 minutes. You only needed him for 21, and Duncan only played 30. So I don't think it took that much out of the Spurs to blow out the Thunder last night.
It didn't. It didn't. It didn't.
All right, Game 6 Saturday night. Let's move to the East. The Heat look to advance to their 4th straight NBA Finals tonight in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Last game, Miami had no answer for Paul George, who scored 37 points in Indy's 93-90 win. LeBron James played only 24 minutes because of foul trouble and finished with a career playoff low 7 points. Stephen A., we'll start with you. What was your takeaway from Game 5?
Well, my takeaway from Game 5 was that, you know, Indiana showed up. Paul George reminded us of the superstar he's capable of being, the kind of guy that we've been looking for the last 2 months or so. When he turns it on like that, this is the potential that he has. Other than that, what I took away from it is I feel very, very sorry for Indiana, because LeBron James is not going to score 7 points in Game 6 tonight. I can promise you that. You can bet the house on that. The kind of game that he had in Game 5, you almost find yourself saying, Lord have mercy, what have you done? Because you don't woke somebody up now. Because after a performance like that, being in foul trouble, being inhibited by the officiating, being messed with by Lance Stevenson, blowing in his ear and engaging in all of those tactics, which, by the way, I had absolutely no problem with it. I think people are being a bit extreme with this whole Lance Stevenson coverage, you know, and guys on the Heat using words like buffoonery and all of this other stuff. If you play basketball, you understand that these kind of things happened all the time. You know, Dennis Rodman used to squeeze people's backsides to mess with them and touch their private areas. I remember one time he ticked somebody off because he passed gas on them, for crying out loud. I mean, it was disgusting. But these are the kind of things that happen, and these are the kind of things that some players anyway do when they're desperate and they're trying to win basketball games. In the case of Lance Stevenson, whether it's flopping or blowing in his ear or listening in to the Miami Heat when Eric Spoelstra's talking to his players, you know, during a little huddle or whatever the case may be. All of these tactics are mental warfare. And when you're LeBron and you're D. Wade, you play a different type of mental game. Because of your greatness, because of the excellence that you customarily exhibit, your mental warfare is through sheer intimidation. When you see Lance Stevenson acting up and Dwayne Wade's laughing, but he's looking at him like, okay, I'm about to get you, that's mental warfare. When LeBron James has that scowl looking like a man possessed, like from years ago when he was in Boston, that's mental warfare. That's not just about somebody doing what they're doing. That's somebody giving you a visual depiction and description of what's about to come your way because they're hell-bent on beating you. This whole Lance Stevenson coverage and all of that stuff is a bit overblown. People need to leave them alone, let them play their game, and whatever works, works, and whatever doesn't, doesn't. But in the case of Miami, what I take away from Game 5 is it was still theirs for the taking, despite the fact that LeBron had a relatively anemic performance due to foul trouble, and I don't expect that to happen in Game 6. This is not a situation that you want LeBron James to gather even more motivation from. It wouldn't surprise me tonight at all if he dropped 50. I'm predicting somewhere around 35 or 40, but it's going to be a prolific performance by King James, who will show up tonight and close this deal once and for all, meaning this series.
I will save my prediction on what LeBron does tonight for a little later in the show. But I want to thank you for bringing up Dennis Rodman, a man I covered when he was with the Bulls. And you are dead on right, Stephen A. Smith. He did this and more again and again, game after game after game, and it often worked. And I must admit, I thought what Lance was doing to a LeBron who was kind of on the psychological ropes with 5 fouls through 3 quarters, I thought it was working. I thought he got a little bit to LeBron, who you could see when you see the video over and over. LeBron kind of winces and chuckles sarcastically. He knew exactly what was going on, and he let it go inside his psyche. So I'm going to give LeBron a pass for the total game of 7 points because he did have uncharacteristic fouls, and I thought a couple of them were stunningly unfair for a man who averaged this regular season over only 1.6 fouls per game. And Stephen A., as you remember, he's had a couple of stretches LeBron has in his career where he's gone 5+ games with 0 fouls. So he's not a fouler by history or by nature. So that was shocking to LeBron's system. But I am not going to give him a pass for the final seconds of this game. I'm going to say it again because he deserves to have this said again. The game was still hanging in the balance despite all of Paul George's heroics. LeBron has the ball at the top of the key. He drives down the lane. He's got a half step on Paul George. He has to take the ball to the basket. He is 6 feet 9 inches, 260 pounds of locomotion. And he had a step on Roy Hibbert also, who had to move across the lane to try to confront him. At the very least, at the very worst, Roy Hibbert would have to foul LeBron James if he wasn't able to just flat out dunk over Roy Hibbert with such a head of steam. And what does LeBron do? He kicks it sideways out to Chris Bosh at the 3-point line in the corner. I don't like the play because I want to see what I keep hearing is the best player on the planet to go to that free throw line with almost no time remaining and make the 2 free throws to force overtime. LeBron has had a history of shying away from that free throw line. He doesn't want to have to stand there by himself and make 2 free throws just to tie. And I thought he shied away from a big moment and cost his team in that moment. And now I hope you're right about this because I think he owes his team tonight for what he didn't do in the last few seconds of that Game 5.
Well, I'm not going to go that far, but I get where you're coming from because I would have liked to see him take that shot as well as opposed to kick it out to Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh had a decent game, but at the same time, that's not a money shot for him because it was relatively contested by Paul George.
It was.
What I will say is you're driving to the hole. Roy Hibbert is waiting there, but you did have some momentum, some head of steam. The one thing that I think that needs to be said is that there have been times when LeBron James has hit big-time clutch free throws. But there's also been times he's missed them because it's not Ray Allen going to the free throw line. And I just think we need to call it like it is from the perspective of, do I think LeBron is scared or whatever? Absolutely not. I remember back in the day that there were times that I questioned a fear of going to the free throw line until I saw him hit a couple of money shots in Boston at the free throw line with time expired. So that wipes away that quote unquote fear. But we have to acknowledge the fact that, Skip, this is not a consistently big-time free throw shooter. It's rough for him. And it's not a matter of being scared or having trepidation. Sometimes it's about knowing your limitations and understanding that somebody else may have a better chance of delivering on the goods than you in a particular moment, and you making the best basketball play. Now, we look at it and we say he should have taken that ball to the hole, no doubt. But the only reason I feel that way is because who he kicked it out to was Chris Bosh. Had that been Ray Allen in the corner, I would not have had a problem with the play. I had a problem with the play because he's kicking it out to Chris Bosh, who's capable of hitting those shots.
Yes.
But clearly, LeBron James had a better chance of making 2 points in that scenario than Chris Bosh had of making the 3. But had that been Ray Allen standing in that corner, I would have had no problem with that play at all.
I do agree with you. Chris Bosh has made some clutch big threes for that team. So it's
Right.
not an awful idea to get it to Chris Bosh in the corner. But again, if we're talking about the best player on the planet, I want to see LeBron finish that play either at the rim or at the free throw line. But go ahead.
Here's the problem, Skip. I hear where you're coming from, but I would hear you even more if LeBron had stepped back and launched a fall-away jumper, because that's something that you've been on him about for years.
I have.
He didn't do that. He didn't do that. He put the ball on the floor, went to the rack hard, drew attention, and kicked it to an open dude in the corner. I can't fault him to the degree that you're faulting him for, because, again, he didn't do the fallback jumper in that particular scenario. He went to the hole looking for a shot or to draw a foul, but saw Chris Bosh in the corner, kicked it to a dude that is more than capable of hitting that shot. Now, he's no Ray Allen, but he's capable of hitting that shot. So for me, I don't think it's as bad of a play as you're trying to make it out to be. And I'm not holding LeBron accountable to the degree that you are, because he didn't shoot the fall-away jumper. Had he shot the fall-away jump shot that he customarily shoots, I would have said, Skip's right. You're right on the money. It was the wrong move to make. But he went to the hole, made the right play. It was just to the wrong dude in that scenario, because I would have liked to see the ball in Ray Allen's hands.
I would have liked to seen LeBron dunk over Roy Hibbert, but that would have changed the series, because that would have probably ended the series. But I see where you're coming from, and we will talk about this a little later in the show.
$2 billion. That's former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer's record-setting winning bid to own the Clippers. There's now a signed binding agreement between the Sterling Family Trust and Ballmer. The NBA must sign off for final approval before the sale is official. Here's what Shelley Sterling said in a statement. I am delighted that we are selling the team to Steve, who will be a terrific owner. We have worked for 33 years to build the Clippers into a premier NBA franchise. I'm confident that Steve will take the team to new levels of success. Magic Johnson weighed in, tweeting, Steve Ballmer loves basketball, is smart businessman, and he'll probably shake every fan's hand outside the arena on opening night. He also added, Steve Ballmer owning the Clippers is a big win for the city of L.A. and all the people who live in the city of Angels. Well, Magic's happy, but guys, what's your reaction? Stephen A., we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I'm ecstatic on a couple of levels. Number one, this guy is incredibly passionate about the game of basketball. He was extremely upset that he didn't gain ownership of the Sacramento Kings initially, because according to several owners that I had spoken to, he approached that scenario like a businessman, like it was a business deal, as opposed to recognizing that the NBA, being the fraternity that it is, doesn't necessarily need him. And so as a result of that, he went about this in a much more different way, and ultimately garnered the level of support necessary where the Board of Governors would be willing to embrace his arrival as an owner for the Los Angeles Clippers. You know, this is a guy that has tremendous connections to Seattle, because he's the former CEO of Microsoft, and there is some indication that he could move the team to Seattle, even though he has made it very, very clear that he has intentions of keeping the team in Los Angeles, and that, you know, he goes to the Clippers games a lot and he supports the team. So it's interesting in that regard. Plus, his personality is very vibrant. He's very outspoken, talks a lot, even busted his vocal cords on several occasions in the process of promoting Microsoft to the best of his ability. So when you look at it from that standpoint, and the fact that the man is worth $20 billion, he's clearly not going to make a profit paying what he's paying for the Los Angeles Clippers, reportedly. So this is a toy for him, and obviously he can afford some toys, and this is one of them. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as he keeps Doc Rivers in place and make sure that he's not an owner that thinks he knows more about basketball than the man presently running things for the Los Angeles Clippers, who is Doc Rivers, it's going to be a plus. There's no doubt about it. The flip side to it, however, Skip, is that what makes me unhappy about this is one thing and one thing only. The fact that it's going on so quickly. Clearly, it's a concerted effort to avoid a vote on a part of the owners, meaning the Board of Governors, in terms of voting Donald Sterling out. That vote is scheduled for Tuesday afternoon, anytime after 1 p.m. in New York City. I personally want to see what the owners are going to do. Are you going to vote unanimously 29-0 to get rid of Donald Sterling, to oust him as an owner of the Los Angeles Clippers? If it's not unanimous, who's going to vote to keep him on? And are we going to find out who those owners are? Me personally, for my own personal edification, satisfaction, I would like to see that vote go down. Clearly, if Ballmer is approved as an owner and Shelley Sterling is able to sell this team, that vote indeed may not be necessary, and the owners are going to get off the hook, which I have no doubt played a role in expediting this process. But nevertheless, it is what it is, and if Donald Sterling is ultimately gone and Mr. Ballmer is in as the new owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, everybody associated with the NBA community is better off for it, myself included.
Mm-hmm. I am with you, Stephen A. I would love to see a vote of each and every NBA owner made public. And I agree with you that this might take, who knows, 6, 8, 10 of those owners who might be on the fence about this issue off that hook. Now, are we sure that they're off the hook? Are we sure there won't be a vote? Here's what I know after the reams of copy that I read this morning. Multiple reports, including ESPN's, say that the Sterling Family Trust has deemed Donald, mentally unfit to have the final say on this sale. So according to incapacitated, but I read the phrase mentally unfit. So Shelley Sterling is saying, hey, as a family, we have deemed him, according to our doctors, to not be capable of making a final call on this sale. So he's out. So we like this offer, $2 billion. Who wouldn't like that offer? Even though, Stephen A., they're going to have to pay, if it goes through, $662 million in capital gains tax. That would still mean that the family trust would walk away with what? $1.4 billion? I think they would be okay with that. Now, earlier in the day yesterday, Donald Sterling's attorney said to several media outlets, we're still going to fight this. So is he? I don't know for sure. I don't know. Maybe you know more than I do, because from what I know of Donald Sterling, again, if he's incapacitated or mentally unfit, that could be a whole different issue. But I'm going to guess that he's going to try to fight this. Does he have a leg to stand on in NBA court? Maybe not. But could it gum up the works, slow down the sale? Could it necessitate this vote to vote him out? I kind of hope so, because I would like to see it, Stephen A.
Well, let me tell you this, man, and I said this last night when I appeared on Anderson Cooper's show on CNN. It's much ado about nothing in terms of these legal battles. He has no grounds to stand on. He has no case. And I don't care what his lawyer says. As far as I'm concerned, it's a bunch of mumbo-jumbo. Yes, there is the U.S. Constitution to take into consideration, but the NBA Constitution is allowed due to the U.S. Constitution. You know what you signed up for. You signed on to be an owner of an NBA franchise with stipulations that fall under the guise of the NBA Constitution. And if you've impugned and sullied the NBA brand in such a way that you've compromised the business in a severe fashion, then they have a right to vote you out. I brought this up the other day, and I'm going to repeat this, Skip. Augusta National, something near and dear to your heart. You know how women wanted to be included in that and how that was a big-time story. Well, what happened is that everybody was trying to gin up public pressure to get them to change their policies. But you couldn't legally get them to change their policies because the reality is, they had a right, because it's a private club, to do what they wanted to do. And if it were keeping folks out, they had a right to do that. The NBA is a private fraternity. You don't have a right to be a part of it. If it's a privilege for the players, if it's a privilege for coaches and executives and others, it is also a privilege for owners. Bill Cosby and an abundance of other people had aspirations over the years to become owners. They had the deep pockets in order to get it done, okay? The Sidney Moncriefs of the world, I'm sorry, I forget his name, the former Junior Bridgman, whoever it is, owning a bunch of Wendy's. They've wanted to be included. The Larry Ellisons of the world wanted to be included. Ballmer's worth $20 billion, Skip, and wanted to own the Sacramento Kings and was denied the opportunity to do so. Why? Because he wasn't selected. He wasn't chosen. They have a right to want and not want whomever they please for their fraternity. And that's the issue here. So talking about going to court and fighting and all, let's not let the Sterlings act like somebody has handcuffed them, thrown them in prison, confiscated their civil rights and civil liberties and all of this other stuff. No. All the NBA is saying is, look, you bought the team for $12.5 million. We have shown you will earn over $1 billion in profit by selling this team. We're not taking your money, okay? We're not doing anything of the sort. We're simply saying, here's all your money, everything you wanted, but you need to go away because we don't want you associated with this three-letter brand of ours that's associated with African Americans, compiling more than 76% of our player populace, who you have so excruciatingly, so desperately insulted. We want nothing to do with you. They have a right to do that, no matter what they talk about in terms of legalities. In the end, it comes down to, we don't want you as a part of this fraternity. Take your money, which you clearly cared about when you were sitting there being a slum landlord, okay? Take your money and go. Have a nice life. There's nothing wrong with that. So they can talk about legal stuff all they want to, but it is what it is. He's on his way out.
I hear every point you just made, and they're valid and strong points. But remember, will Donald Sterling have a legal right to fight for the final say on the sale? Because is it really Shelley Sterling's place to sign off on whatever offer it is, to be able to pick this Ballmer, or it's not a group, it's just Ballmer himself? Because I'm not sure about that, Stephen A. And also, let me say, remember, this is a $2 billion offer for a team that just, a year or so ago was still a laughingstock around the league, a team that is still clearly the second team in Los Angeles, a team that Donald Sterling bought for, $12.5 million in 1981, and all of a sudden, Steve Ballmer is offering, 4 times more than the highest price ever paid for an NBA franchise, which was the Bucks price of recent history. Just a month or so ago? So he's offering way over, 500 and change. So he's offering way over market value, which is a sweetheart deal for the league because it now gives Shelley the chance to say, I'll take it. We're out. And the league would like Donald and Shelley to just go away with their happy, $1.4 billion. I'm just still not sure it's going to be that simple. Donald does have a right to fight his wife over who has final say on the sale. That's all I'm talking about.
Yeah, but the NBA has a right not to want to be a part of that. So in the end, if the owners vote him out, and especially if it's facilitated, which it obviously is, by Shelly Sterling, well, excuse me, she owns 50% of the team, even though he's seen as the majority owner. If your own wife, who owns 50% of the team, who you've been married to for 58 years, is claiming that you're mentally incapacitated and therefore incapable of running this show, when you have people on the record like the Doc Rivers, like the Andy Roses and others who will tell you that Donald Sterling hasn't been involved in day-to-day operations for years, then you know something? If Bowman comes in, you're the Board of Governors, you vote him out, and then he can fight in terms of how it was wrongly confiscated from him, and maybe he could facilitate getting more money or costing NBA owners more money. But in the end, he's gone. His days are numbered. Whether it's Tuesday via the vote or sooner because ownership is approved, the bottom line is Donald Sterling is on his way out, as well he should be. Goodbye. Good riddance. Have your whole building with nothing but your office in the daggone building, for crying out loud, off of Wilshire Boulevard. Have a nice life. We'll see you sometime down the road. Nobody cares. We just want you to go away.
Okay, last quick point. Just in fairness, being completely journalistically objective here, are we sure that Donald Sterling is, quote-unquote, mentally unfit to have final say over the sale?
No, we're not.
No,
we're not. But here's the thing, Skip. If we want to pay attention to Shelly Sterling talking like she had nothing to do with this and she shouldn't suffer because of the racial rhetoric her husband spewed and how she's totally innocent and whatever, we want to give her credence on that level, but we want to strip her of credence talking about this man she's been married 58 years to. So on one hand, we want to sit there and look at 58 years of marriage and give her credibility and credence when it comes to her trying to skirt away from whatever level of culpability she has towards him, because you had to be, you're married to him, you got to know where he's coming from, you had to know what he was about. We want to bring up how she secretly tried to hoodwink tenants into revealing their thoughts or whatever the case may be, or exposing them. We want to give her credibility on everything else, but when it comes to this, we want to act like she don't know what she's talking about. Pick one. If you knew what you were talking about then because you were married to the man for 58 years, then damn it, you know what he is now. And I'm going to roll with that. In the end, goodbye. So we just want you gone.
Okay. Bottom line, I hope so badly you are right. I hope they both are about to go away very quickly. I'm just not convinced it's going to be that clean and easy.
The commissioner understands that there is a significant credibility gap that exists in the National Football League now. Someone asked me earlier, why do you think it's taken so long for Roger to act? I don't know, and it's not my job to guess. What I do know is that in the past he's shown a tremendous amount of speed with which he's willing to punish players for similar conduct. Why it's taken so long to apply that same deliberate act to an owner who should be held to an even higher standard is something that our players don't understand.
Don't make judgments until we've had an opportunity to do what's in the best interest of everyone, which is getting the facts. Everybody wants process. DeMaurice Smith talks about process all the time. The process is important.
What about HGH testing? Where are we with that?
The only reason it's being held up, it's not being held up on anything that has to do with HGH. It's not being held up on anything that has to do with DUIs. It's not being held up on anything that has to do with the frequency of testing. It's being held up because one man wants to keep the power to be the judge, jury, and executioner. And that's not right.
All right, does the NFL have a credibility problem? NFL Players Association Executive Director DeMaurice Smith is calling out Commissioner Roger Goodell for the league's approach to several issues, including the double standard of punishing players versus owners, like Colts owner Jim Irsay, who was arrested in March for allegedly operating a vehicle while intoxicated. He was also found with $29,000 in cash and bottles of prescription drugs. The NFLPA critical of Roger Goodell. Stephen A. Smith, we'll start with you. Whose side are you on?
I'm not on anybody's side. I can give a damn about either side, to be quite honest with you. Just give me my football games and I'm cool with it. But I will say this. I've never met Roger Goodell one-on-one. It's something that I would love to do. I respect the man. I respect the job that he has done as commissioner. Haven't agreed with every single decision, but I find for the most part him to be fair, for him to be relatively thorough. There are times where, it's one would challenge that, like the whole Bounty Gate with New Orleans. I went on the air and apologized to Jonathan Vilma for crying out loud because I thought it was necessary considering the heat that I contributed to bringing down upon the New Orleans Saints, only to find out that the NFL had to backtrack to some degree because as the investigation continued to be ongoing, we learned that there were some balls that were actually dropped on the part of the National Football League, at least as far as I'm concerned. But still in all, nobody's perfect, and I think that Roger Goodell is a damn good commissioner, and I, personally speaking, I'm very fond of the work that I think he has done. I would say the same to some degree anyway about DeMaurice Smith, who I have met and talked to on many occasions, who I have a profound level of respect for, who I think does an incredible job for the Players Association from the standpoint of trying to fight on their behalf. The level of productivity, however, is another question entirely, and that's where I think all of this becomes a bit convoluted. We need to understand that the collective bargaining agreement that the players signed with the National Football League, the Players Association, to some degree, was taken to school. The NFL, by and large, got a vast majority of what it wanted. And you have to look at the leadership and you have to look at the players as to ask that question why, and to really dissect, issue by issue, and how effective they were during collective bargaining negotiations. And when I look at DeMaurice Smith, here's the thing that I have heard, that I have been told ad nauseum, and that I find to be absolutely positively true whenever it comes to the NFL. DeMaurice Smith and Roger Goodell genuinely dislike each other. They are contentious with one another. There are times when I would dare say that although he exudes professionalism always, DeMaurice Smith comes across as downright acerbic towards Roger Goodell. And I think that even though Roger Goodell appeared very composed yesterday, I don't think it's beyond the pale to surmise that he was a bit perturbed by the accusations leveled against him by a DeMaurice Smith. It seems to be personal animus between the two. And I think along the way, it has gotten in the way of more productive things being done on behalf of the players. That's not to say that DeMaurice Smith is not skilled, not qualified, not gifted at what he does, because I would never accuse him of that. And I understand that the late Gene Upshaw, God rest his soul, who somebody like our very own Robert Smith is far more qualified to speak about than I could ever hope to be. But I will say that let's take a moment, while there were so many players in the past who were incredibly critical of Gene Upshaw, let's take a moment to give him credit. It is well known that Gene Upshaw could pick up the phone and call former Commissioner Paul Tagliabue, and they could work privately behind the scenes together to get things done. Whether it was collectively bargained for or not, somehow, some way, there just seemed to be a willingness to work together, to be cohesive, and relatively friendly, understanding that business is business, but relatively friendly in order to get things done that were in the best interest of the league. Roger Goodell constantly preaches about what's in the best interest of the league. DeMaurice Smith constantly preaches about what's in the best interest of the players. But I think their personal relationship with one another needs to be thoroughly investigated, because I think a legitimate argument could be made that both are guilty, equally so, of getting in the way of what's in the best interest of the league. Because even though one preaches on behalf of the players the way that he should, and the other preaches on behalf of the league and the owners the way he should, I think their personal animus towards one another gets in the way. But in the end, DeMaurice Smith has to understand that even though Jim Irsay is an owner and Roger Goodell has the latitude to deal with him, he's still one of the dudes that employs Roger Goodell. Let's not act like in America we don't know what's going on here. Irsay being an owner, one of the guys that pays the bills, is entirely different than being one of the players who gets a check cut for him. There's a difference between somebody who cuts the check and somebody who cashes it. Let's understand.
Okay, you went many, many directions in the soliloquy you just gave. And I like some of it, and I did not at all like where you eventually went with it. I love the job D. Smith is doing for the Players Association. I love it that he is now on the public attack on Commissioner Goodell. I love it that they are contentious on and off camera. I thought Roger Goodell, my take of him on camera from what we just saw, that little snip we just saw, I thought Stephen A., he looked as uncomfortable and unsure of what he was saying as I've ever seen him look on camera, as defensive as I've ever seen him look on camera, because I think he got blindsided by this latest salvo from D. Smith about two big issues that face the NFL right now, as we know. And they're separate issues to me. But I love it. Like you talked about, I went through the Gene Upshaw years. Obviously, I was covering the league back then. Yes, they had a very cozy relationship. Yes, they could work hand in hand behind the scenes, Tagliabue and Gene Upshaw, to get things done. But to me, too many times, those things got done to the detriment of the Players Association and the players. So I like it that D. Smith is fighting the good fight here. Now, this puts me in a little bit of a tough spot because let's deal with the issues. You and I agree on the owner issue. I have covered this league for years and years. Trust me, without going into gory detail, I can list many owners who were not exactly model citizens, and you could probably add up their issues and say their issues added up to more than Jim Irsay's issues. This man, Jim Irsay, all the way back to his days at SMU, he's fought with his alcohol problems, his substance abuse problems, so now he's charged with, 2 misdemeanors. And it's hard to punish him for that because, as you say, he's an owner. So what do? How do you enforce a suspension of an owner? It's difficult. How much can you fine him to really hurt his pocketbook? Not enough. Could you take draft choices away from Irsay for getting busted, for driving under the influence? I don't think you could. So I'm with Goodell on that issue. But I did like what D. Smith said about HGH because, again, the players want a little more protection here in the process. They're willing to give up HGH needle testing, but they're saying, hey, we need an arbitration process here. We need somebody who's an independent judge. We can't let the commissioner be judge, jury, and executioner of our HGH findings. So I'm with D on that one, and I'm with D in the big picture. I like the animus. I like it contentious because I think that the Ryan Clarks of the world, as a player representative, are loving the job at this point that D. Smith is doing for them.
Well, Skip, let's be practical here. First of all, I totally agree with you about the HGH. I totally agree with you about Roger Goodell wanting to be judge, jury, and executioner. I totally agree that those are things that need to be addressed. But DeMaurice Smith has been on the job long enough where those things should have been able to have been addressed. And they still haven't been addressed. We've been hearing about this for years. What's the difficulty in confiscating the power? I understand it's not easy. I'm not saying it should be done, but let's acknowledge at least why it's so difficult and go from there. Once somebody's in a position of power, they're not going to give it up. And even though you may like the contentiousness, Skip Bayless, every time I turn around, I hear about the Players Association hiring another lawyer. There's a whole bunch of lawyers employed by the NFLPA. We get all of that. We understand what a great lawyer DeMaurice Smith was. And he's equipped for this fight. He is qualified. He is somebody that should have the job that he has. Nobody is questioning that. But let's understand something here. Everything can't be a fight. Not everything. Not if you want to get things done. And that's the issue here. I often say to you, I sit on the air, and I brought this up in the past as well. At some point in life, we all as adults have to make a decision at some interval or another, whether or not we want to be listened to or we want to be heard. Some people want to talk just to be talking, just to be talking. I'm about the business of getting it done. What's it going to take to get it done? Sure, I got lawyers. The NFL has lawyers too. Whose pockets are deeper? In all likelihood, the billionaire owners and the NFL, as opposed to the players, okay? But the point is that some things don't require that. If everything is about getting lawyers involved, why the hell do you need an executive director? If you can't sit there and pick up the phone and have a personal relationship with somebody where we can surmise this is in the best interest for us all, let's get this done without the contentiousness, then what are you accomplishing here? And I'm not holding DeMaurice Smith so accountable all by himself. Roger Goodell is culpable in this too. Do what you can to work out a relationship, but let's not sit here and say and act like it's always good to be fighting. Because if you're fighting all the time, it gets to a point where you're just fighting to be fighting as opposed to getting things done. And if that is the mentality, the players, as we have seen, usually don't win. And that's the issue here. How many times have we looked at the players and said they're losing this? They're not gaining an advantage here. HGH, Roger Goodell's power. The list goes on and on. The players are continuously losing. Why? At some point, it's about people not being able to get together. And that's the bottom line.
Okay. But bigger picture here, Stephen A. Smith, you're talking like a man, like a fan who just wants his football on his Sunday afternoons and his Monday nights and his Thursday nights. And I get where you're coming from. But in the end, I do appreciate the players' position. They are the show. This is an incredibly violent and injurious game. And I thought in the last negotiation, in the 11th hour, I thought they caved in. Ryan Clark came on this show, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, and said only one player representative voted no at the end of that process, and it was the Pittsburgh Steelers' Ryan Clark. Everybody else said, we fought this long. We just want to play our football too. Let's go to training camp and get this show on the road. I thought they sold out a little bit. It benefited all of us because we got our football back, but I still think that they need strong, tough, that animus representation that you're talking about, that contentiousness on D. Smith's part.
Country singer Kenny Rogers didn't win a Grammy for his song You Got to Know When to Fold 'Em and When to Hold 'Em for nothing. There's something to be said for that. You got to know when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, know when to run. That's what it is. You know why? Because billionaires have deep pockets. And without football, they're going to still be billionaires. Without football, are the players going to still be millionaires? No. You got to sit there and think about it on that level. I'm not saying you cave, but you got to know what fights to fight. Period.
I had no idea you were such a country music fan.
Nor did I.
I'm not, but I know that song.
First Take is on the road for the NBA Finals. The fun starts June 5th and continues until a champion is crowned. Here's how it works. If the Spurs make it, join the show at the San Antonio Hard Rock Cafe on the Riverwalk. If the Thunder get in, we'll see you in Oklahoma City at Toby Keith's in Bricktown. And we're at the Clevelander Hotel on South Beach for the Heat, or Ram Brewery in downtown Indy if the Pacers make it. So wherever the show goes, we expect you to come out to catch the live show. Congress is weighing in on the Washington Redskins. 50 U.S. senators urged the team to change its name, citing that racism and bigotry have no place in professional sports. The team took to Twitter to defend itself with this tweet. Tweet at Senator Reid to show your hashtag Redskins Pride and tell him what the team means to you. That didn't work out so well. The tweet was met with quite a bit of cynicism and contempt. Hashtag Redskins Pride. Guys, what's your take? Skip, we'll start with you.
Stephen A. Smith, this issue to me gets more shameful by the day. And it's very possible that yesterday, thanks to the Redskins website, this issue hit its shameful bottom. Because the deeper we get into this issue, Stephen A., to me, the less that Redskins management and ownership seem to get it. A lot of people, this trended all day on Twitter, this hashtag Redskins Pride trended all day because so many thousands and thousands of people were outraged, and they should have been. Clearly, to me, the nickname Redskins, which I now have a hard time even uttering publicly on this show, is a blatantly racist nickname. It is mind-blowing to me that the Redskins have gotten away with, as a team, using this nickname for as long as they have. So now we've completely hit bottom with a hashtag, Redskins Pride, which is basically asking people to embrace the racist nickname that so many senators, so many national leaders want to go away sooner than later. So I don't know what Dan Snyder, as the owner of this team, is thinking, Stephen A. If they would just lay low and stay quiet, they would have a better chance of hanging on to this nickname than actually having the audacity, the brazen audacity, to go on the Twitter attack with this nickname. There is no pride to me in the nickname Redskins. Your response?
Skip Bayless, I completely agree with you that the Redskins, and particularly Daniel Snyder, is embarrassing himself more and more with each passing day. Not simply because of the manner in which he's choosing to handle what has regressed into a fiasco, but because of the fact that he appears to be more cowardice with each passing day because you don't see him speaking about it enough. I will give credit in all seriousness to a Jerry Jones. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, if Jerry Jones were involved in this, if a Robert Kraft was involved in this, dare I say even if Mr. Benson for the New Orleans Saints was involved in this, you would see them front and center expressing their position on this. And I'm not talking about via a statement or some orchestrated interview or anything like that. I'm talking about repeatedly ad nauseum. If you're going to be so emboldened and you're going to be so defiant in the face of growing momentum as it pertains to this name, then have the courage not to be orchestrated or choreographed. Be impromptu. Speak from the heart. Don't issue statements. Stand front and center and say, this is my team. I paid this amount of money for it. This is our franchise. This is the research that it shows, etc., and address it like a man. Daniel Snyder has not done that, and that's my issue with him. But I will say this. That's one side of this coin. On the other side, however, let me say respectfully, I could give 2 cents what the politicians on Capitol Hill have to say. You know why? Because most of them go to Redskins games, and most of them have been supporting the Redskins and going to their games for decades. And I haven't seen this momentum grow before. I didn't hear their voices ad nauseum before, but all of a sudden, as this momentum swells, you want to jump on a bandwagon like typical politicians tend to do. Where the hell were they all of these years before? The Washington Redskins have been chilling in the nation's capital, right down the block from Capitol Hill. You walk around D.C., you see people in their Redskins paraphernalia. They've been doing the chants and everything else that comes along with it, stuff that we now have learned is racist, that is offensive, that is bothersome to a lot of Native Americans. They have been saying, they have been expressing these sentiments for many, many years. What did these same politicians have to say then? Absolutely, positively nothing. And to me, that's the kind of thing, dare I say, that makes Daniel Snyder's defiance almost acceptable and easier to stomach, because he's looking at the hypocritical tendencies of the boys down the block in the nation's capital, and he's saying, who the hell are y'all to talk to me about anything? Jumping on a bandwagon, the fair-weathered individuals that you are, you got a lot of nerves. And I understand that sentiment on his part. Now, again, you and I are of the same ilk, Skip. If it's offensive to the few, it's offensive, period. You need to address it. You ain't Native American. You can't speak to what's offensive to them. They get the opportunity to do that. And if there are an abundance of them that are saying this is offensive to their heritage, you know, their ancestry, and so on and so forth, that's good enough for me. Just like Jack Kent Cooke was being interviewed by the late, great George Michael, God rest his soul. Man, I miss that man. When he interviewed Jack Kent Cooke, and Jack Kent Cooke refused to change the name, and Charles Mann, who was a star on the team, was asked by George Michael about it being offensive. He said, it doesn't matter whether it's offensive to me or not. The fact that it's offensive to them should be enough. He said this as a member of the Redskins, and politicians still said and did nothing. So I don't want to hear from them now. The Native Americans, that's different. I certainly want to hear from them, and I want to respect their wishes. But the politicians, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in hearing what they have to say, because as far as I'm concerned, all they're trying to do is get extra camera time and press, and it means nothing to me.
Okay, I hear you about the politicians, but in our previous debate, I defended the NFL Players Association. That association has said repeatedly, we want to kind of keep an arm's length from this issue. It's not our issue. We shouldn't get directly involved in it. At some point, Stephen A., I think the players in this league need to stand together to help get this nickname removed from Washington. I don't know where else it can start except with the players, because apparently the other owners are not going to pull together to pressure Dan Snyder to remove this nickname.
I'm not saying that the Players Association should take one position over the other. That's their business. But I don't want to hear them saying it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with them. They are the Players Association for the National Football League. And to sit back and to say we have nothing to say and we have nothing to do with this is beyond cowardice on their part. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. They need to stand for something. Whatever position they take is fine, but they definitely need to take a position. To be neutral is as weak as it gets on their part.
Think it's safe to say hashtag Redskins pride was hashtag Redskins fail.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The Miami Heat have won the 2013 NBA title.
Major League Baseball.
The Boston Red Sox have won the World Series.
The full championship series.
The tide has risen again. The third time in 4 years.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
That was a pretty interesting tactic by you. Where'd you come up with that one?
Just playing ball.
Did he blow back in your ear?
Just having fun and playing ball.
Blew my wife's ear before.
That was definitely a defensive tactic. Well, our teammates won't do that. That's just not how we are. We would. We focus, like I said, we focus and concentrate on basketball.
If that was a teammate of yours, would you pull on the side? Michael Jordan say, stop being so immature?
Not even immature, just stop.
Expect Lance to pull any of those antics tomorrow night?
I don't know. I'm not going into the game worried about Lance or his antics. I'm just trying to win a game.
Lance Stephenson kept up his shenanigans on Wednesday night, blowing in LeBron James's ear during a stoppage in play in the second half. Stevenson says he was just having fun, but with a playoff career low 7 points, Game 5 was not fun for LeBron. Here's the question, Skip. Will Stevenson's antics impact LeBron tonight?
Stephen A. Smith, I want you to go first on this because I want to hear what you think. You suggested early in the show you thought LeBron was going to score like 40 points. I want to hear you make your case on that.
Well, my case on that, Skip, is simple. I think that he had a bad game in Game 5, primarily due to foul trouble, and that he looks at Game 5 and says to himself, we were so close, we were right there. Had I played better, we would be going back to the NBA Finals. I think you could see the look on his face. It's not a big deal. It's something that happens, and that when you're great, you make up for it. They're still ahead 3-2 in this series. They have an opportunity to close them out on their home floor in Miami, And I suspect that they will do exactly that tonight in very, very convincing fashion. And I think that LeBron James is going to have an incredible game tonight. I don't want to say, let me take that back, not incredible, something that's relatively normal for him. In the 30-plus range, possibly 40 points. He's going to do significant damage tonight. Make no mistake about it. He's going to make sure he's not in foul trouble, and he's going to do his thing, and he's going to put a hurting on the Indiana Pacers, and I dare say I suspect they know it. That's how I feel about it, because I think that he's going to be on his home turf. He's going to be inspired by the crowd, inspired by going to his 4th consecutive NBA Finals, and he will be ready. When you're that great, you're that accomplished, and you've overcome the obstacles that he's been able to overcome in his professional career, a performance like this is the kind of thing that can linger if it's repeated. And I don't think he's going to let that happen, because I don't think that he wants to hear the mouths of yourself, me, or anybody else trying to rev up, issues from the past. He's not going to want that. He's not going to allow it to happen. And I think his performance tonight is going to be big time. But I also think the whole Lance Stephenson thing, it's much ado about nothing. I'm actually ashamed listening to some of the players talk, listening to some of the media and how folks are reacting to what Lance Stephenson did. It's a small thing. It's not a big deal. Have we become such sissies, such babies, that we want to make something out of nothing to this level? The guy is blowing in his ear. He's following them when they're walking over to talk to the coach. He's doing things that qualify as little irritable things that anybody who has played the game of basketball knows occurs all the time. And by the way, they're even going as far as to question whether or not this could affect his stock, because executives may not like that. What I see is a guy in Lance Stephenson who is erratic at times, who needs to continue to improve on his game, but has improved vastly, is a high-level competitor, doesn't go out there and act scared to go up against anybody, plays hard all the time, and by the way, is grossly underpaid and deserves his money. If George Hill's getting $8 million a year, don't tell me Lance Stephenson doesn't deserve at least 10. The fact that people would make this out to be some kind of issue that could actually sully his reputation or whatever is utterly ridiculous. I'm just looking at guys, and then you got guys on Miami, you're going to use the word buffoonery. You understand how that connotation being attached to somebody like Lance Stephenson could look. Why don't we be careful with our language here and understand the guy is just competing. If it worked the other night, LeBron James scored 7 points and the Miami Heat lost. How are we going to sit there and take that and look at Lance Stephenson and have a problem with him? It's ridiculous. It really is. Handle your business, go out on the court and play, and stop looking for an excuse to diminish this dude. He's just competing. That's all he's doing.
I echo your sentiments about Lance and his antics. And let me say, Stephen A. Smith, I'll be honest, I'm going to admit this publicly. I have not been very interested in this series until right now. I thought, as I said here on the air, that Game 1, which, as you remember, Indiana won at home, I thought Miami didn't take the Pacers seriously enough. The Pacers got off hot. They made some early threes. George Hill made, 3 threes, it seems like, in the first quarter. And Miami couldn't quite climb back out of that hole. Then they won, 3 in a row to go up 3-1. And I am completely with you. You can say these were desperate tactics on the part of Lance Stephenson, but they worked. I thought he did get a little bit under LeBron's skin. I thought he got a little bit inside of LeBron's head. And I don't want to harp on this. I don't want to make too big a deal of it. But in the past, there have been times, even though LeBron has overcome those times again and again, but those times in which LeBron was a little mentally vulnerable, a little psychologically vulnerable to opponents' trash talk or whatever. Remember, it was Lance who got fined for grabbing his throat, saying that LeBron was choking. What was that? Was that 2-3 years ago? So he started this, and he's keeping it up 3 years ago. Okay, and then remember, he said that LeBron is showing mental weakness. in trash talking back at him. And then all of a sudden we get the blowing incident, blowing in his ear. It's just little stuff. It's almost like Rucker Park stuff that I'm sure you saw growing up, Stephen A. Park kind of stuff, where it can be trash talk, it can be little antics, anything to get the opponent off his game. It worked in Game 5. I liked it, and I'm with you. To me, it enhanced Lance Stephenson's stock because of the number that he did on LeBron in that game, holding him to 2 for 10 shooting. And again, he had a lot of help because Paul George was helping on and off. But in the big picture, I'm now interested in tonight because I'm not so sure that LeBron's going to be able to respond with a monster payback kind of game. I'm not sold on that because all of a sudden the Pacers caught a little confident fire the other night. Paul George finally looked like that guy we expected him to look like, that capitalized Paul George that we thought we might see in this series. So I'm thinking Lance has high confidence. I like the way he's handled himself after the games, just shrugging and saying, just playing ball. We'll keep playing ball, Lance, because I'm going to be on the edge of my seat tonight. I think it will be a much closer game. I think even at Miami, I think the Heat will have a harder time closing this out. I still think they'll win a close game, but I'm liking Indiana's chances a lot more because of Lance Stephenson. And finally, Stephen A., I did not like the fact that USA Today texted Larry Bird, "Are you bothered by his antics?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And obviously, coach, players, everybody, they all got down on Lance, and I didn't think they should have gotten down on a main reason that they played so well in Game 5.
Well, first of all, you know, I'm disappointed to hear, because I didn't know that about Larry Bird with USA Today.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed to hear that because let me tell you why Larry Bird had a problem with that. Larry Bird had a problem with that because he doesn't want anything that's indicative or remotely reminiscent of the kind of characters they once had on Indiana that he tried, that he ultimately got rid of.
That's a good point.
But and there's no question about that. My response to that is get over it. Larry Bird was on the court talking smack. Larry Bird used to listen. Dr. J. Julius Erving, the dude that everybody was comfortable making house calls, punched Larry Bird in his face on the court because Larry Bird was busting his butt, but while doing so, you know I'm going to shoot a 3 from right here, right? You know I'm going to go this way, and then I'm going to pull up on you, right? You know you can't check me, right? Larry Bird talked more smack than a little bit. So why are you going to be a hypocrite and have a problem with Lance Stephenson? And oh, by the way, LeBron James is the best player in the world. I'm not going to sit there and think that Lance Stephenson held him down or that LeBron James is not going to come back. He will wreak havoc tonight, in my opinion. But let's be clear about something here. Because he's LeBron and because he's the best in the world, makes even more sense to me why Lance Stephenson would try something. Because what else can you do? There's everything everybody else has tried against LeBron James has not worked. So why not see somebody try something else? Nothing else works. If I'm going against the best in the world who wreaks havoc and brings, just dominates time and time and time again, and some other tactic has not been tried, why not try it?
All right, the guys agree. Lance Stephenson's antics, much ado about nothing, to bring some Shakespeare in here. Game 6 tonight on ESPN 8:30. Last night, Skip Spurs came out with a 117-89 win over OKC, snapping their 7-game losing streak against the Thunder when Serge Ibaka's in the lineup. They're up 3-2, 1 win away from making back-to-back finals appearances for the first time in franchise history. Game 6 is Saturday. Skip, who wins?
Mr. Smith, I'm going to stick with my pre-series prediction. Spurs in 7 games, winning a very close down-to-the-wire Game 7 back in San Antonio. But I'm here today to tell you I feel a whole lot better about Game 6 than I did about 24 hours ago, because I loved it that my Spurs finally cracked the code. They broke the spell that Serge Ibaka had over this entire franchise. 6 previous times this year, 4 in the regular season, games 3 and 4 back in Oklahoma City, Serge Ibaka had done his big-time number on these Spurs. He had intimidated them. He had demoralized them. And last night they figured out how to attack him with a little different lineup featuring Boris Diaw in for Thiago Splitter, who's just lost in this series. And, of course, my man Manu in for Danny Green. Even though Danny Green hit some big shots last night and the Spurs bench prevailed with Danny Green hitting big shots, Patty Mills hitting some big shots, Ginobili was the driving force. He was the fire starter. And once again, even though the Spurs have now lost, 9 straight games in Oklahoma City, I remind everybody during this last regular season, by 5 games, they had the best road record in the NBA. So I think they have regained their confidence. I think they will attack and then drive and dish to open shooters much better than they have in those 6 games against Ibaka previously this year. So I'm looking for a close game. I'll still say that Oklahoma City pulls it out. I'm going to go 105 to 100. But I think the Spurs have gotten their confidence back enough that I will trust them far more to close it out in 7 games back in San Antonio.
I think that's the way to go. I think you were right to call it for 7 games. It's amazing to me how lopsided this entire series has been. Every game has been a blowout. Every game on the home court, the team has won. I don't anticipate that San Antonio is going to Oklahoma City and winning Game 6. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Oklahoma City blew them out Saturday. I'm reluctant to make the daggone trip, for crying out loud, since there's double connections required just to get there. It's just nauseating, to be honest with you, to have to travel to this game. But nevertheless, once you get there, it's going to be a big-time basketball environment. I have no doubt that Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant will respond in kind, and they will force a Game 7 back here in San Antonio, because I don't think San Antonio is going to bring its A game. I think they're going to reserve that for Game 7. They'll come out and try to make some noise early, but the second Oklahoma City gets momentum, just like Greg Popovich was thinking about Tuesday night, he'll be thinking about Monday, this Saturday night. It's just going to be that simple for me, and I see the San Antonio Spurs losing Game 6 and coming back and winning Game 7.
But again, Stephen A., the beauty of last night's blowout, shocking blowout, in which they led at one point by 33 points, is that Tim Duncan was required to play only 30 minutes and Ginobili only 21 minutes. So they are capable of giving you 30 or 35 minutes if, in fact, you hang into the fourth quarter of a Game 6. Would Coach Pop like to finish this off in Game 6? Well, sure he would. And if you get the Thunder a little bit on their heels, boy, I would go for the jugular on this one. But, again, you could be right. Maybe he'll just play for Game 7.
It's not happening, and it's not a matter of fatigue. Tim Duncan and those boys weren't tired in Game 3 or 4. The problem was they were getting run out of the building, and Greg Popovich said, let me go to my bench. And Boris Diaw and them, diminished a 27-point deficit to 11 points. But that was from their bench. It's not about fatigue or anything like that. It's about the fact that they were getting thoroughly outplayed. Tim Duncan certainly didn't seem to lack energy when he was arguing with Greg Popovich, and then ultimately, one of the players coming off the floor about what they should be doing from an assignment perspective. They were getting thoroughly outplayed because the Oklahoma City Thunder are an entirely different team at home than they are on the road. That is why they will win Game 6 on Saturday, but they got to come back to San Antonio. To me, their best shot at winning this series was last night in Game 5 when they had that momentum. Now San Antonio knows they can overcome anything against these guys, and I think they'll be ready for Game 7, and I think they'll be geared towards Game 7.
Okay, give me a final score. You got a blowout? You got it by 20 or 25?
I see Oklahoma City winning somewhere along the lines of 107 to 90.
17. I might take 17 in San Antonio.
We asked you earlier in the show to tweet who's going to win Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals tonight. 67% of you say hashtag Heat clinch, 33% believe Indy still lives on. All right, speaking of Game 6, LeBron, he's looking to redeem himself after a rough Game 5 where he racked up 5 fouls through 3 quarters for the first time in his career. How many fouls will be called on LeBron James tonight? Stephen A. Smith, we'll start with you.
I have no clue. I don't know what kind of question that is, my man. I mean, 3, 4, who cares? I just know he's not going to foul out, and he's not going to be in the same kind of foul trouble he was before because, number one, he'll be at home. You got to remember, a couple of those calls against him were highly questionable in Game 5. That won't be the case in Game 6. He'll be on his home court. He's a superstar in this league. He's going to get favorable treatment because there's not going to be calls against him on a back-to-back basis like that. It's not going to happen. And LeBron James is not going to allow it to happen because he's not going to allow himself to be in a position on his home court in a potential closeout game that's going to take him to the finals to get it ruined by him getting in early foul trouble. It ain't happening. You don't have to worry about that tonight. No matter what he has to do, he will avoid foul trouble so he could be on the court when it really, really counts doing his thing. No need to concern yourself with that at all. It won't happen in Game 6 tonight.
I actually kind of like this question, so I'm actually going to answer this question.
You would.
Thanks, Skip.
Go ahead.
I know. You know, it is interesting. You brought up the favorable treatment LeBron has gotten for much of his career. I think he has been pampered and coddled and often protected by the refs. He's had two stretches of about 5 games in which he had 0 fouls called on LeBron James. And what was it, 2 years ago he averaged 1.4 fouls called on him per game. This year it was 1.6 fouls called on him per game. And as Kerry points out, 5 fouls called through 3 quarters the other night. So the conspiracy theorist in me would suggest to me that LeBron would have 0 fouls called on him tonight because you would think that the league would want LeBron James to go ahead and sashay right on into the NBA Finals because clearly the league could use LeBron and company in the Finals as opposed to the Pacers in the NBA Finals. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I do believe that the referees have cracked down this year a little bit on LeBron offensive foul-wise. So I'm going to say he winds up with 3 fouls called on him tonight. 2 of them will be offensive fouls. And I do believe, Stephen A., that the other night, with 5 fouls, the referees let him get away with, in the fourth quarter, a couple of little shoves on Lance Stevenson, a couple of little offensive foul push-offs that probably should have been called, even though you're exactly right. A couple of the previous fouls were just phantom fouls. I couldn't figure out why they got called. But I will say he'll get a couple of offensive foul calls, and I don't see him having the monster game that you think. So I'm going to go a very close game tonight. I'm going to go Miami 95-93, and I'm going to say Dwayne Wade is the hero down the stretch. I like the way he played down the stretch the other night. Again, Rashard Lewis hit 6 threes the other night, so they're going to need some production from him. But I think the Pacers come in with a lot of confidence, and I do not think this will be the blowout you think it will be.
Well, I think they're going to run away with it. I don't think it's going to be a blowout per se, meaning from start to finish or anything like that. I think it's going to be nip and tuck for the first 3 quarters or so. And then after that, in the fourth quarter, Miami's going to pull away, and they're going to run away with it. That's what I believe is going to happen. I believe LeBron's going to be a catalyst, but it's not like Dwayne Wade is going to be a no-show. He's Dwayne Wade. He'll have an impact. It's what he does. It's the kind of moments he lives for. And I think that he'll be fine. But I also think that LeBron James is going to be on his own mission, and the players are going to feed off of that, but they're also going to feed him and let him get a little loose because he was relatively non-existent in Game 5 due to his foul trouble.
Okay, what do you expect tonight from the near star that has been Paul George, who had his bust-out playoff game the other night, albeit with the off-court issues that he has faced clearly this year?
I don't think he's going to have a horrible game, but I think he's going to be humbled because in the end, he's not on the level yet of a superstar. He's still going through some growing pains, and I think he'll experience them tonight. I think he'll score around 23 to 25 points, but in the end, when it's really, really time to have an impact, I believe he's going to be shut down.
So, give me a score. You got Miami pulling away and winning handily by 15 or 20?
I got Miami pulling away, winning somewhere along the lines of 102 to 90.
102 to 90. Pacers plus 12. I got Pacers plus 12. I'll take it. Thank you.
So much math today, fellas. All right, in case you're just joining us, Skip predicting Miami 95-93 and Stephen A going with the 102-90 win. Warriors point guard Steph Curry made his first extended public comment since Steve Kerr was hired and Mark Jackson was fired as head coach. Curry, who's always been a strong supporter of Jackson, says he and his teammates didn't see it coming and called it a, quote, weird expedited situation. Stephen A., what do you make of his comments?
Well, I find them to be relatively clueless. And we all know how much of a fan I am of Steph Curry. He's my favorite player to watch in the NBA. But how could you say you didn't see this coming when everybody saw it for months? The fix was in. We also heard the coach, Mark Jackson, talking to the players during a playoff game, saying, you're playing, you talk about doing this for me. No, do it for you. You deserve this. You've earned the right to be here, etc., etc. We all understood that Mark Jackson was working under incredibly precarious circumstances because the fix was in. The Golden State Warriors wanted him gone, and they wanted to move on. And I do applaud Curry for saying what he said. He supports Mark Jackson. He wishes he was still there. The players loved playing for him. I don't understand why Mark Jackson's name hasn't come up for either the Knicks job or the Lakers job. Makes no sense to me whatsoever. But in the end, let's not act like we didn't know it was coming. All of us saw it coming down the pike. Steph Curry and those boys are going to perform. They're not going to lay down on the job for Steve Kerr. But at the same time, to say that they didn't know is a bit disingenuous or clueless because everybody knew.
Yeah, but Stephen A., to me, Steph's comments are exactly why I thought Steve Kerr should have taken the Knicks job under his mentor, Phil Jackson. I thought there would be far less pressure with the Knicks job. I know Steve is a terrific analyst. I know he was a fine player. I know he's one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. I know the brass in Golden State were going to love to work with him. But those players did not believe that Mark Jackson deserved to be fired. I didn't believe it. You didn't believe it. Nobody on the outside looking in could have believed that Mark Jackson, after all the success he had, should have been fired. So, hey, can Steve Kerr coach? I have no idea. Watch what happens. If they lose 3 in a row early in November, December next year, that seat's going to get a little hot because those players aren't going to love the fact that the coach they loved is no longer there.
Well, they ain't going to get hot. It's a 5-year, $25 million deal. They ain't getting rid of him after 50 games. You can scratch that.
Okay, but what if the players start to rebel against Steve Kerr? And I think it's still a possibility because they love the previous coach so much. If they don't like the direction Steve is going with them, I'm not sure.
Steve is not the kind of guy you rebel against. He's too nice of a guy. Now, you may prefer playing for Mark Jackson or whatever the case, but you're not going to rebel against a guy with the character of Steve Kerr. You're going to play hard. You're going to at least do that.
Well, I hope you're right for Steve's sake, but I still say he would have been a better fit with the Knicks than with this team.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
I'm Kerry Chow. Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can catch First Take at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on ESPN2.